Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, February 20th meeting of the Community Preservation Committee here at Town Hall. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted via in-person and via remote means. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8, Verizon Channel 26, or online at www.northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. If the public would like to participate in the public meeting, please email your questions or comments prior to or during the meeting to cpcemails@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be provided to the committee before the meeting or read during the proceedings if received during or shortly before the meeting. Good evening. Tonight we're going to hear some FY26 applications. Ridgewood Cemetery is up first with Mr. Smolak presenting. So let's get to it. I hear there's something on at 8 tonight.
Yes, there is. I got pictures. I just walked through the car through the garden. Oh man, it's mob.
All right, well, John Smolak, member of the board of Ridgewood Cemetery. With me remotely, I hope, is Joe Pellich, who's the president of Ridgewood. He's under the weather and has the flu, and it's better off that he's there instead of here. So hopefully he'll be able to chime in when we need him. But I assume that everyone has seen the application that we submitted. And so, first of all, certainly at Ridgewood, we really appreciate the work that the committee has done for us in the past, over the past 15 years. And, we certainly think it's the CPC has really been helping to really make a difference over at Ridgewood. And now at the second burial ground, we really appreciate that. And hopefully we can do more. And so for today, or for this evening, we have really two projects that we're proposing, one at the Ridgewood Cemetery site and one at the old burial ground site. So with respect to the Ridgewood site, we're taking a look at conservation and restoration of what's the so-called Atkins Gate, which was a stone structure, which, if you've been to Ridgewood, it's right off of Marble Ridge Road as the entrance there. And this gate was constructed as a result of a bequest by Ida Atkins, who provided some property to the cemetery, and so subsequently was constructed in around 1944. And since that time, Ridgewood was before the CPC, and the town ultimately did fund, based on the CPC's recommendation, a limited 10,000 sort of restoration, repointing of that wall structure and so on. And but we've learned since that time that the repointing really wasn't enough, and there are some really structural issues that we have with that wall, both from a safety and also from a structural standpoint. We're a bit concerned about it, and we want to preserve it, and it's part of a request, and it was also identified in our National Register nomination form as being a contributing element for the cemetery. And so that entrance also is surrounded by additional landscaping that was designed by an individual named Harlan Kelsey, who was a well-known landscape architect. And so some of the landscaping has been updated and upgraded, but still a little bit needs to be done with respect to that as well for that area. And so from the photos that we provided to you, I think it shows sort of the gate structure and so on. I'm sorry, I don't have a PowerPoint or anything to show you, but you have the application. but the photos clearly show some structural damage and stones. It's a stone-based gateway, and the pillars are starting to erode. You're seeing some of the stones fall out of those pillars as well. And so we're, as a result of, 80 years of wear and tear. So we're looking for the CPC's recommendation for a funding in the amount of $250,000. I don't know if Joe Pellich is here remotely, but he is someone who is going to explain the numbers, and I don't have the numbers with you, and I'm sure that's a question that you have with respect to the basis for that funding. And so if he, sorry about that, I don't have the additional.
Can you talk about the scope of work?
Sure.
About the dollars?
Sure. So I think that we're going to have to take a lot of that wall down and the posts down, similar to what we did with the main gate on Main Street, and to rebuild it and start with a more solid base, which would be more of a granite type of base, but basically replicate what's there today and make it look as if it's the same type of structure. So we're going to have to break it down and repair it that way, and that's where the main amount of the cost is. And the number that we've come up with was based on, historic work that we've done at the cemetery and based on, our experience over the years in terms of what that work would entail. To the extent that you need a more detailed breakdown, we could certainly try to provide that to you and supplement that as well. And apologize, but it doesn't seem like Joe was.
I just sent him the email, and I just sent him.
Oh, he did, okay, thanks, I appreciate it. So, that was the first project that we had wanted to discuss, and happy to take any questions. If not, I know that folks want to be out of here pretty soon, so I'll try to keep my comments.
What are you looking at the landscape improvements, the restoration?
Well, the original design included a lot of rhododendrons, and so I think what we want to do is supplement that both inside and on the outside, on the Marble Ridge Road side of the walls, to sort of repopulate that so that they regrow in those areas. So that's the extent of that, if that's helpful to you. And if there are any questions, I can go on to the second project. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And the second one is dealing with the second burial ground. As you may know, Ridgewood took over ownership and management of the second burial ground from North Parish back in 2021. And prior to that time, the Historical Society and North Parish had been doing a lot of work in terms of restoring the markers and inventorying who's interred there. And but it was becoming a sort of a financial burden for North Parish, and so we started conversations in 2000 with North Parish, and ultimately came to an agreement to acquire the property and to start to undertake some restoration on the property as well. And a lot of the property, even though it's like 1.25 acres, a lot of the property has been overgrown, and the CPC had recommended in the past, as you know, funding to restore some of the walls in that area, which is underway. And this one is, this project is really unique. And unlike Ridgewood, which is designed in the garden style of cemetery, the garden style cemetery movement, like Mount Auburn Cemetery in the early 1800s, this is more of the sort of the English style of cemetery, which is located next to a churchyard. And so it's a different type of design, different type of development. And so there are, a number of family plots scattered throughout the site. There's a mounded area that's in the middle of the cemetery, which we initially thought was just an earthen berm. And then over the course of this past summer, we started taking a closer look at it, and because there are holes opening up on the top, and we investigated a little bit further, and as you saw in the photos that we submitted with the application, we uncovered something that was really kind of amazing, is a series of burial tombs. And so So we decided to take a closer look. We sort of, we did have consultation with a number of different consultants because this type of structure is a bit unique. We took a look at, what the National Park Service had offered in terms of preservation briefs, and there's preservation brief 48 and 26, and then there's some information that's been put together by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, but nothing that really touches upon this type of structure. So we decided to seek out someone or consultants that have been familiar with this type of work. And so we found a consultant that was identified out in the Plymouth area that had done work at the old granary burial ground. And in circumstances like these burial tombs, usually they're one-offs, meaning they're not usually in a series. And here we have about a dozen of them. And a lot of them are brick with a cast iron gate in the front, or a door in the front of them. And it's granite as well that's embedded in them. And so some of them are starting to structurally deteriorate, and some of them are to a depth of about 8 feet, and so that's being exposed to the weather and the like. And so what we'd like to do is restore those tombs to what they had looked like. Some of the tombs that are out there in terms of design, some of them are buried in earth like they were originally, some of them are open. But I think it provides a great opportunity to sort of reopen those areas and expose sort of the detail that was performed before they were covered with earth. And they are all enclosed and so on. And so what we'd like to do is, try to permanently preserve and close them, not only for public safety purposes and to prevent vandalism, but also to sort of respect those who are interred there. And so that is our, effort with this second type of project, which does involve a fair amount of structural work and we actually got bids as much as $2 million to do this work, or $1.5 million, and we've found a way to bring it down in cost, and that's what we've presented in this application as well. And again, unfortunately, Joe doesn't appear that he's able to chime in, but he'd be able to provide sort of the details of the costs. We've brought in, again, a consultant that's from the Plymouth area that has done this type of work, and we've also brought in Wildwood Nurseries, who has done a lot of work for us over the years, and we've made every effort to sort of reduce those costs. It may be that we're able to reduce it more, but we don't know until we get into the restoration work, and what we're trying to do is avoid having to come back and ask for additional funding. And certainly if it comes in $100,000 or $200,000 less, we'd certainly be back to you to let you know that. So that's the second project, and happy to take any questions that you may have.
2 questions. So I think I know the answer to this, but once you've restored these, are you going to leave them open, or are you going to cover them back up?
Well, I think we're going to keep the exterior of the fronts exposed, because at that time they'll be
not the brick
conserved and
sides.
preserved, yeah. But I think what we'll do is we'll try to cover the rest of the structures. I don't think we want to keep the whole row exposed, because that'll just result in further deterioration and exposure to the elements.
And the gates, how will they be secured?
Good question. I think, I haven't looked at them specifically, but I think what they'll be fastened so they're permanently closed. And so to the extent that we can conserve some of those gates, we'll try to do that. If not, we'll try to replicate them. And so, some of them are in decent shape, some of them are not in great shape, and some of them date to, well over 100 years old, based on what we've seen, what we've uncovered. Sure.
For the resting places, the vaults, what is the legal requirements if there's a potential to disturb?
Yeah.
Are you required to communicate with any descendants to get permission? Because that could impact the ability to move forward with the project.
Yeah, good question. We're being very careful not to disturb any of the graves themselves, and we're going to have to be very careful in that regard. In the event that something does occur, we'd have to call the, state archaeologist potentially at Mass Historic to review it and to make sure that we're doing things appropriately. But we're purposely keeping away as much as possible from disturbing the actual graves that are within.
How many are in this project?
There are a series of 12 tombs, and there are multiple folks that are buried in each of these.
So these are
tombs.
families?
These are family, that's correct. That's correct.
I just have a statement and a comment. My statement is this project seems to be about as closely aligned to the historic interests of the Community Preservation Act for really, my entire time here. So this looks like a great one, but my question is, can it be phased? This is a large dollar amount for a single project and in a very small area. Can it be phased? Can you do a third of it, a third of it, to spread it out?
Yeah, good question. And I guess, with the phasing of any project, your costs potentially go up exponentially.
Mobilization.
Right, mobilization, demobilization. It's not impossible. I don't have the specific answer as to what we could do for phasing, but it will result in the cost going up, like anything, but.
I mean, one of the things
Considered
with
that.
these historical projects, as you've seen before, is the number of people who can do the work is vanishingly small. And, having some predictability and being able to do the contracts up front and have the resources for the life of it, I think, I understand where you're coming from in there, but it may be the more optimal solution to do the whole thing at once. And, it'll probably take more than a year, wouldn't it?
Well, we're hoping it can get done in a year. I mean, basically, we can't start until July, right? So, I can't give you an answer as to whether we can accomplish it and finish it. It depends on the weather and other conditions, but our intent is to sign up a contract. If town meeting votes to approve this, then we'd try to get the contract signed up and go immediately and start. So I can try to get a better answer for you on the phasing, but that's, yeah.
All our options before we vote.
Sure.
Thank you.
You've been involved, the Ridgewood is involved with the cemetery now for the last few years. And I just wanted to know, are you comfortable that you pretty much have got through a survey of sorts, or an inventory of your property, you've got everything sort of uncovered because, well, that's
Yeah.
kind of a, but anyways, because it's just,
Yeah.
I'd hate to see this thing going, oh shit, look what else we found kind of thing. Right now, you've got a,
Yeah.
acre and a quarter? You probably have touched every piece of ground of an acre and a quarter by now.
Right, well, there is a survey, and before we touched anything, we did ground penetrating radar, GPR, to try to pick up anything that might not be obvious. Excuse me?
Is that how this was found?
No, this, this was a structure under earth that no one knew about, and, and unlike a house inspection when you buy a property, we didn't have that luxury. And it just happened that these holes opened up, and that's how we discovered them, and then we did some digging, and then we realized what we had. And so I guess, on the one hand, it's a pleasant surprise to find it. On the other hand, it's a lot of cost to do it correctly and to restore it. So, no, I mean, we weren't looking for the vaults, and we were just looking to make sure that in areas that where there were burials, that we were able to identify those that were unmarked, and so that we could, restore those areas, but also restore some of the areas that are just overrun with brush. And so, as you saw from some of the photos, we started on that effort as well.
So, John, first of all, I want to say thank you for your just commitment to the cemetery. I know it's an important, place for our town, an important place for history. So, you and all the board members, I just want to recognize that. In terms of, this is a large amount of money, though, $1.2 million. It sounds like you've done your, I don't mean to question it,
It's okay.
It's a large amount of money, no matter how you slice it, right? Even when you've done your financial diligence. How much money has the committee given the cemetery over the years in total, do you know?
I don't have that number
Yeah.
right offhand.
We have it-
I know, it's a sizable
It's
amount.
been about $4 million.
Yeah,
about $4
yeah,
million.
it's a sizable amount.
So it's a sizable amount. Is there any other funding that you can seek? And you're asking our committee to approve this in total, right? No other funding sources?
Not for these projects at this point.
Is there any other funding you can seek from other grants or organizations or?
We're pursuing them. We're pursuing a lot of different ones.
Yeah.
There was a DAR grant that was out there that we thought we had, and we had to be a 501c3, and we're a 501c13, which is a cemetery corporation, so we didn't qualify. We've gotten some grants in the past from the state for the old burial ground, but it's really a small amount
Yeah.
that we're able to be awarded. We've gotten some grants at Ridgewood as well through there's the Historic Preservation Group in Methuen, the Methuen Festival of Trees Committee, but that was like, which was a significant amount, it was about 25,000, I believe. But most of the grants out there, we haven't been able to tap into any sizable amount. We're going to continue to pursue other grants through, for example, the Stevens Foundation, which has in the past donated funding to us. That resulted in the redevelopment of the gatehouse that's at the main entrance of the Ridgewood Cemetery. So we're continuing to look for those. We have our administrative folks looking for different types of grants to apply for. It's just we haven't been able to hit upon any for this particular project.
I mean, one of the things to set context here is under state law, every town and city has to make a provision for cemetery. So effectively, what Ridgewood does is assume that burden away from the town, which would be a substantial cost to the town on an annual basis if they had to fund and operate a cemetery. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've taken the approach that we had over the years because of that unique role that they play in the community.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I have a question too. Like, let's take a look at, like, Ridgewood and Second Burial Ground are totally different things to me, because one's, sort of an active cemetery and one's the other's more historic. But one of the things I'm wondering is, like, you mentioned the Stevens family, like, are any of those tombs, like, Stevens family tombs? And, like, if the tomb was at Ridgewood and there was a family that's still around, would they be the ones that would be in charge of sort of restoring it?
Well, what I'll say is, as a general proposition is that we have solicited from folks, and we have not yet been successful in securing funding, and so we're continuing to pursue that. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, you're right. We've discussed that, and we've reached out to some folks, but we just certainly haven't been able to get someone to pull the trigger on those.
I mean, I agree with, everything that's been said about the historic significance and so forth. I just kind of wonder, like, I totally get headstones and this is who was here and so forth and so on. And then this level of sort of, like, going down that next level, I understand where it's coming from, but I also wonder, like, sort of, sort of the historic preservation piece, is not the same, right? Like, it's not like a historical record. It's it's a little bit more familial, right? Like a record that says this is where, Benjamin Osgood was and buried, and this is a marker we have. That's one thing, but then sort of a tomb, is a very different thing, and I get, like, the significance to the family and all those things. I just wonder, like, the public interest thinking about that is a little bit different in that situation, which.
Well, and I wonder about the optics too, particularly this year. In a year where, I understand that, we have funds that need to go a certain place, and that's how a lot of funds are in town and in government. But in a year where next week we're going to be talking about laying off dozens of teachers in our town, and then in the same meeting where we ask for approving that budget, we're also going to be asking for, an eight-figure number for a cemetery and historic preservation. That might be a tough sell. That concerns me. And again, like Bill said, I don't doubt the historic importance of this.
Right.
But this committee is also significantly
Yeah.
invested in this cemetery as well.
Right, right, and you know, it's sort of apples and oranges too.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I
in terms of
understand.
the funding source and so on. I certainly understand optics and,
John, I know you had a buzzword there that rang to my ears and was good, and that was, we went out and got bids. $2 million, $1.5 million, we're lucky to get it down. I would like to see that kind of evidence of
Okay.
the process of quotes, of bidding, in order to get to the number that you've got. And the same thing's true with the gate as well. It just, right now, you're saying, based on our experience, like, you guys are great. I mean, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but I'm an accountant, I'm an
No.
auditor, I'm a CPA, I'm like,
Yeah.
show me, show me the paper.
no, you want the backup. I certainly understand. And so,
Yeah.
so, you know, we can certainly see what we can produce for you. And a lot of the discussions, I mean, a lot of these discussions have occurred with Joe Pellich, who's been like an absolute expert in terms of being able to get these costs down. And so I'll speak with him after
Yeah,
the,
we can get some support behind that.
Some
That'd be
hard
great.
data
Right.
helps us substantiate what you're
Right.
asking for,
no, fair question.
so we can defend it if, the
Sure.
project is approved.
These kind of contracts you're getting into, are they fixed price, open-ended?
No, they'd be fixed. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lump sum,
Who does this kind of work?
not to exceed.
Who does this kind of work?
Not too many
I
people.
was gonna say, yeah.
No?
Yeah,
That's
as John was saying, there's a company down in Plymouth that does this work, and they have one of the few that has this limited experience in this type of restoration.
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't have to use them, we won't, but if we're able to find someone who can, as a substitute, be able to step in the shoes and do something, you know, same quality but a lot cheaper, we'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been
Well,
sort of
it's the biggest
striving for.
challenge, anything historic
Right.
preservation is
Right.
there's few folks that do it, and it's
Right.
expensive and slow work, and that is what it is, so that
Right.
makes it a challenge.
Right.
Great,
So-
well.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
everything you do.
Coming.
Thanks.
Thanks for all your work. Okay, could we have Ms. Burzloff come up for the, never remember the name, the stables? I know, we used to call it, we used to call it the carriage house, and then we were
Carriage house.
corrected,
Then we
right?
found out we were calling the carriage house was something else, and so
Yeah.
now we call it the stables.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think if you remember from last year, our goal with the stables is to make it watertight and button it up so that the mold will stop getting in, the animals will stop getting in, and we'll be able to preserve it for future use. We're in the process right now of stabilizing the floor area that was crumbling. And so this is the next phase. We did the roof last year. And so now we need to do the masonry. And I provided you with our architect's cost estimate. They gave us a low end and a high end. I went with the low. I'm hoping that if we can get this out to bid by the end of March, we'll be able to take advantage of people who are just setting up their jobs. So the earlier we bid, the better we'll be, with the understanding that the work couldn't be performed. It's subject, we always put in our bid, it's subject to town meeting approval, and that work starts on July 1st. So, and what we've also done, we haven't done it here because we're meeting next week to discuss, the plans have just been finalized for the bid docs, but we're also going to do alternates. Because we don't know if we're gonna be able to have enough funds to do everything we wanna do. So what we'll do is take the most critical areas that need to be fixed and put those first, and then just list a bunch of alternates till we have it all.
Great, and then, like, in terms of, I think we've all appreciated the fact that it's been, we've been doing a little bit every year, which is good. And in terms of, like, down the road, would there be another phase after this, like a phase 3?
So after this, we're hoping it's all watertight and locked up, and then we probably, the only other thing we have left to do is to rip out the drywall that has mold on it. We haven't done that because it doesn't make any sense when you're still having water get in. Depending on what that's going to cost, I was just told last week by Steve Foster that we have to have an environmental test done because of lead paint. And if you have to remove lead paint, we've just like tripled the cost. We can't just have someone go in there and rip out. So it depends. If we can do that within our budget, ripping out the drywall and everything within our budget, we'll be done. And we'll figure out a plan with Fireside Catering as far as what's gonna happen now, because I know, the Mass Audubon, talked about programs there, Youth Center talked about programs there. They are fine with, whatever uses the town, has on the horizon.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Yeah, those are my questions.
Yeah, it's sort of in line with what was spoken earlier, as well as what Bill was just saying. The next phase is, so like, can't we just get it all put together in one package and get her done? But I'm not sure if I want to with the lead paint issue.
It's too
yeah,
expensive.
yeah, that was kind of disappointing to hear. I didn't know that there's a special
Oh, yeah, you'll have to have a full abatement
disposal
process.
and, yeah, so.
It may have been in here, but I couldn't find it. Where's the other 150,000 coming from?
So we took the low estimate.
Oh, you have a total
Oh,
cost
the
of
total
450.
cost, that's the high estimate. We would use the funds that we get from the Stevens Estate Management Company.
So you were saying, Larry, you're gonna set this up as a base bid and then have additive alternates?
Yeah, the base bid will be what's absolutely critical. I mean, we hope to get it all done, because I don't want to have to, in a year, find out that we, had an area that should have been, wasn't critical now, but it's critical a year from now, so.
Let me ask this question, would it be wise to go adjust your amount so that you can get the full scope? I don't know what the architect has deemed absolutely essential, but I would assume that the list of work is critical to preserving and securing the outside shell of the building.
I was gonna say, shouldn't we find out the answers to some of those questions before, or why should or we should not?
The one thing I do know is, we just received permission from the Historical Commission to reduce the size of the chimney. I don't know how much, this estimate was before that. I don't know how much that is going to take off of it, but that is one thing that we are. And then the flooring that's being done, when they ripped out the flooring, there was some masonry work that we made the determination that it made more sense to do now than to not put it in this masonry, and that was also discovered after this estimate. So I think there may be a couple of places where we're gonna see that we are lower than what's here, but we're meeting.
But this doesn't allow you any contingency if you find any unforeseen conditions
Yeah,
out
that's
there
kind of
either.
what happened with the floor.
Yep.
We're
I'm-
meeting on the 3rd, and I can provide you more information at that time as far as, we're gonna come up with our list, as far as the alternates are concerned. And I can let you know if they have any adjustments to this estimate.
So does the town feel that the building is important to care for because it's historically significant, or because of what we want to use it for in the future? Or both?
So I think that it's, well, I can't speak on behalf of the town.
Yeah.
But I think it's because it's historical.
Right. But we don't know what we want to use it for.
No,
Okay.
no. Years ago, it was used as a, function hall, or I know they had some craft fairs in there, I remember going to at one point. We've tossed around having lodging in there for the weddings. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things you can do with it. But
Yeah.
from what I understand, the town as a whole does not want to see this building torn down, and that's why we're doing this.
Is it,
We bought the property originally, and all the land, and then in all the early years of CPA, we were working when the town ran the, you know, the business there. How can we preserve this? The problem was that there were more pressing needs in the main house at that time that we had to invest our money in, and I think that's part of the reason why it deteriorated a little bit. But I think it was always our intention from the beginning. People love the building. It's just
Yeah.
a cool building, and wish Terry was here. He could probably tell stories about it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Sounds good, so why don't we do this? Laurie, why don't you send in a number that you think is the right number afterwards? You know, your application was submitted in time, but, you know, we can know what you think the full number is.
Okay.
And then going in, and that doesn't mean we'll, you know, fund the project or fund the whole thing, but at least we'll have an understanding of what the scope is. And it's a good estimate, it's a good scope. I mean,
Right.
it's, you know, they put some work into it, so that's great.
Okay, yep, I can do that, and then, of course, if the bids come in prior to, I mean, we're hoping to go out, it won't be before you vote, but it might be before town meeting, so it could be a situation where we would have an exact number too.
Does the Affordable Housing Trust want to go next, because you're up there already? So, okay.
I'm just here for moral support.
Yeah, right. Good evening, guys and ladies. Thank you. So tonight, we're here to talk about funding for Fountain Drive, which currently is a elderly/disabled housing complex that's managed by the Housing Authority, which I know we have a couple members that know that well. And they're looking to expand that facility to 6 additional units. And what we're looking for is funding to support that expansion. The funding would be somewhat proactive because we feel that in the coming year, they're going to be looking for design work, site work, et cetera, quotes. So the funding for the $200,000 is to help support that upfront design work. As we all know, housing is a very important need in this town, and especially for our seniors and disabled folks. So we're trying to look to support that. I think the Affordable Housing Trust does a tremendous job supporting folks in all kinds of ways. So this is just another way of reaching out to the community and supporting them for housing. With that, I'll take any questions.
Yeah, I was looking at I was looking at how much funding we have, and as we all know, 10% of the funds need to go into each area each year, whether we spend them or not. So we could, you know, if we get $3,300,000 should go for affordable housing, and this year you guys are the only affordable housing applicant. So I was wondering, like, it seems to me that it's a little, like, if you need $200,000 for Fountain Drive, that's good. I know you also have other things. You have rental assistance, down payment assistance, other programs. So one of my thoughts is, like, why don't we just allocate the full 10%, and as opposed to keeping it sequestered in sort of a, you know, an accounting entry and not kind of out there ready to do that stuff. So the last 3 years, we've had 2.9, 3.1, and 2.9 $1 million. So I would say, like, if it were grossed up to, like, you know, 300,000, that would be the 10% allocation. And, you know, we always keep track of, you know, the funds that we give to you guys, and you guys keep track of that. So I think that would make sense.
Great suggestion. Of course, we were coming in with this one project in mind, but we do have what we're working on right now is a home loan repair program, where we'll be working with Habitat for Humanity to reach out to folks that have critical needs for their homes to be able to stay in their homes, seniors, disabled, whatever low-income folks, to be able to stay in their homes where they have to have maybe a roof replaced or something. It'll all be there'll be obviously an application process, there'll be an approval process, et cetera. But that's another program we'll be looking at. We are looking at, we're pretty far down the road with Habitat for Humanity for that as well. So we're just dotting the i's and crossing the t's right now, but that'll be another program. So, yeah, maybe an expansion of that program. I can see a lot of critical need for that. And as you said, we've got, we've had other programs in the past, rental assistance, first-time home buyers assistance. So, the trust has done tremendous work, and a lot of it goes to this person to my right here, the credit.
Would they amend the application to actually add some of those words into this as well, so that we could, because when we put this in the town meeting, we do add those kinds of things
Sure.
in there, and
So
people
I-
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe even if you wanted to split it into two, like 200,000 for this project and 100,000 for.
So we're not
for,
too late
trust.
at the application process, if we get that?
Yeah, I mean, you've got your application. Your application was in. It was in on time. I think it'd be fine to
adjust it.
amend it, adjust it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's fine to do it that way as opposed to reserve the money if what you're proposing is ripe. If it's ripe, if it's close to being ready. And the thought that occurred to me is if you want to do like a down payment assistance program or something, or seniors, I'm not quite sure what the focus is. It's probably not a bad idea to start small in the beginning, because I think the hardest part with something like that is who do you give the money to under what criteria? And that's not a simple thing to do. And part of the problem with housing, and because I remember about 15 years ago, we did something where we did a version of that. And when you looked at the way the money was funded, there was no rationality. It didn't look good in the end, because some people got a lot of money for no particular, you couldn't explain it. So I think you probably want to be really careful that you're equitable and clean and fair in the way you do it. And it's probably better to start with not a whole lot of money in the beginning, maybe 150,000 or something before you go and scale it up.
Well, actually, that's the amount we're looking at. If you're talking about the home repair program, that's the amount we were originally funding
Yeah.
it for, 150K. But we've had other programs that have been running for a while, like rental assistance, and they've been successful. We do have criteria. We work with a partner who's rental
But
assistance.
that's the
Brendan
housing
Roses.
trust, right?
Yes.
As opposed to directly the, money funded from us. It's not all the money you're spending is from CPC, right?
That's right. That's correct.
Yeah.
So we have some funding, other sources as well, yeah.
So-
But both of the programs that are currently going on right now, the rental assistance program, which is administered through Greater Lawrence Community Action Council, and the down payment assistance program, which is administered through CAF, which was formerly Bread and Roses. It's all criteria-based, it's all income-based, it's all complies with CPC regulations. It was all set up that way. And we basically work like a grant to those, and they when something comes along, like the down payment, when they get a buyer, they send us all the information, they do all the approval, and then we write the check based on that. So we have those programs already set up that we've used as a basis for the home repair
The one for
program.
Fountain Drive, why are you funneling it through the Affordable Housing Trust and not directly through the Housing Authority?
Well, we're a funding source for the Housing Authority, right? So the housing,
I mean, we've never done one like that. We've always in the past given the money for a Housing Authority project directly to the Housing Authority.
So one of the reasons we did that is they're not ready yet. I spoke with the Housing Authority Director. This has been something that I know, and you guys can probably speak to this, it's been going on for a long time. We thought that they would have been already out to bid and had whoever was taking it over, but it's been delayed significantly. So we didn't want them to get their bids back in like July or August and then have to wait a whole year to come to get funds from this group, from the CPC, in order for them to start the project. So that's why we were kind of being proactive with it. It goes back to, I know last year when we requested, or the year before when we requested funds, the 10%, one of the things that we feel strongly about is we have the ability to act immediately, and you guys don't. So this is kind of where we're coming from with this, where whenever Housing Authority is ready to go and they have their nonprofit that's going to build these units, then we're ready to go with the funding so that they don't have to wait.
But if you build the units, I gotta believe that 6 units is gotta cost more than total, more than $1 million. I mean, you know, probably substantially more than that, the way the costs are. How does the whole thing get financed? Does it get financed through the state, or does it through the town, or how? You must bond it and have
Maybe we can-
mortgages and all that good
Maybe we
stuff.
can lean
so-
on our,
Yeah,
our
so I think
housing
that they
authority
go,
folks.
they
yeah.
do go through
There's
the
two people
HUD,
from
Variety
the
of
state.
complicated
the
funding
Housing
sources,
Authority
yeah.
on this board, so.
Yeah,
He's fairly new, and I'm still learning. But there had been a presentation about a year ago from Habitat for Humanity. I think you were there, right? And then, you know, because of like some legal issues relating to the deed, it's gotten more complicated. And so, there's a lot of pieces, and Maggie's just on it. Maggie, the executive director, is totally on it, and she keeps us informed. And I had been wondering about, you know, when a project was gonna move forward. And so I like the idea of having this pot of money there. And if you use, you know, if you do create something that helps people fix their homes so they can stay in their homes, and they're using a similar criteria to some of your other programs, I like that approach
Yeah.
because I went through the same thing myself. That's how I bought my home here.
Right.
So I do understand, and I think that when you have something that's really good, you want to keep doing it. Kind of obvious, but do you have anything?
No,
You wanna add?
I can't necessarily answer your specific question, John, but one thing I can say, just at a 10,000-foot level, and I'm probably telling folks in this room stuff they already know, but just the need for housing in this community, all across the state, but especially in this community, is just insanely great. The waiting list for North Andover residents, these are people that already live in town, to get into an affordable home is over a year, and that's not even near among, you know, some of the other places across the state. For folks that want to move into this community, the wait is over 3 years, and these are people that are eligible to be in low-income housing. So when we can get 1, 2, 6, it's a small drop in the bucket, but I mean, these type of projects, it's not over-exaggerating, will be transformative for the lives of these people, so.
I think I
I'll
could,
just emphasize that.
I think I can sort of answer your question just as a broad overview. Typically, these projects, and I know this because of the Greater Lawrence Community Action Council, they will have federal funding, they will most likely apply for some state, some tax credits. They do loans through, that are specifically for affordable housing. I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's through HUD or whatever. But I would expect the Housing Authority, when this is ready to go, will come here for some of it, I would think. But the rest of it gets funded. It is very, very, very complicated. I don't understand it completely, but I do know from going through it on the board of Greater Lawrence Community Action Council, there are a lot of things that line up, and so.
And, you know, we do have a fund balance, but we like to keep that kind of in reserve in case a distressed property or something like that becomes available, and we can purchase that and flip that over for affordable housing. So, you know, we don't like to exhaust all of our funding, so this additional $200K or $300K would be, you know, available and, like Laurie said, proactive when this project kicks off. So we have that available and be able to work with them and get it started.
I'm sure the executive director, whatever questions you have, John, or anybody else on the committee would be happy to come here and talk. She's such a champion of so incredibly grateful for the CPC. She talks to so many of her colleagues. She's, you know, one of the leaders across the state in like a state association of housing authority directors, and she frequently mentions how, and you know this, Marcia, how folks from other places across the state come to her and say, how were you able to fund this? Can't believe you're able to do this. And she talks about how she's had a generous CPC that's really transformed the lives of a lot of these people. So
I just want to tell you personally, I'm really happy that you've put this proposal in, because I was concerned there wasn't going to be a representation for the housing, for affordable housing, which is different than housing affordability. And a lot of people don't know the distinction. if they aren't like in that world. And I'm still learning, but I am excited to see how this plays out personally.
Great, so why don't we get that revised? And then I would just note too, like if we put the money in for Fountain Drive, that's a project, and normally we say like, you got a project, you got, 2 years, and then, we come back to you, and if the project didn't happen, we would, pull the money back, and it would still count, we'd still have to use it for another affordable housing project, on the 10%. But
She's very responsive, as you know.
Have we done that? I didn't realize we could do that, Bill. Have we done that?
No, we do that all the time. Projects sometimes don't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
It used to come for like 100,000 a year, just
Yeah.
for that very reason,
Oh, I
that
didn't know.
you have to move when you move, so,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. So no, I think that would be the right way to do it, and.
Okay, and we can attach to the application the information on the critical repair program.
Right.
Yeah, just
'Cause we-
consider
we-
it a revision.
I mean, it's gonna be set. at our next
Addendum
meeting,
or
right?
whatever.
Right, yeah, we have it on the agenda for the next meeting. We
Yeah.
just worked out all of the conditions with Bread and Roses, not Bread, I'm sorry,
Habitat.
Habitat for Humanity, so that was a bit of a process, but we got that all squared away now.
And they already do this. We're just sort of giving them more funds to use solely in North Andover. But they do this in other cities and towns around the Merrimack Valley, so they're really experienced at it. It's an unbelievable program that I never heard of before, and I'm glad that we can help them.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. May we have the Kuchikowik Lodge application? Come on up, introduce yourselves, and
Sorry if I stand?
yes, you can go, you can sit or you can stand, it's up to you.
I prefer to stand, thank you.
Okay.
As you know, we here at a meeting a few months ago. I didn't know if we were requested to come here to answer some more questions, or would you like to go over the whole thing again, or? I know
Sure,
we
I'd
did
say
it
like,
for part of-
yeah, just
Okay,
do
all
a
right.
general overview. and-
All righty, sure.
Yeah.
I'll go quick, because I know somebody had something about a time thing, so. Oh. So Kuchikowik Lodge was chartered in 1874, has been part of Andover continuously since then. We bought our current building from the town in 1922 and moved it to its current location. And we've been running it as a function hall and lodge since then, monthly, for over 150 years. What we're trying to do with the funds from here is we're trying to preserve the building. I took over as president of the Kuchikowik Lodge Properties in September. There was a lot of, in the past, deferred maintenance, which we are hopefully fixing with our own elbow grease as well as some of our own funds. The roof is in considerably bad shape. I can sweep up half a roof of shingles on the sidewalk most windstorms, unfortunately. So we're looking to put a new roof on there so that we can continue for the next 150 years. The lodge supports the community through we do a 2 monthly Red Cross blood drives. We have a low-cost, open to the public monthly breakfast. We support the Boy Scouts. They just had their Pinewood Derby in our building. We do low-cost rentals. If anybody needs a small venue for fundraising or scholarships, we donate the lodge. We have the Movement Family, which is a family-oriented charity out of Lawrence, meets in our building weekly. It's for children with broken homes, and they try to make them have a community family by showing up at their meeting, and they run events and have dinners and such and so forth. We host the town's holiday festival committee. I know meets in our lodge at least once a year when they have their after party and they're all done and doing things like that. And, you know, in the past, we've done things like part of our property that was donated to us, we donated to transferred to the youth center so they could build the rest of their parking lot, which put us on a smaller footprint, but we used their parking lot and they got the property. So if there's any questions, we've had dozens of, somehow or another, my name got out on the internet as looking for a roofing quote. Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. I'll tell you, I don't know who was trying to help, but somebody put my name and phone number on one of these roofing websites, And I've had them call from Gloucester and New Jersey, every place. And we've had roofing quotes from,
Now the quote's down to $2,000.
yeah, I wish yeah. But what happened is we've kind of picked a median quote to go with. I mean, I have quotes from in the $50,000 range. I have quotes in the $20,000 range. What we've applied for is something in the median, with leaving a little bit of side money for ourselves in case there is an issue. Once you strip a roof on a over 100-year-old building, who knows what's going to be underneath there. So we've had a little bit of our own funding held aside in case something happens there. But we're just looking to preserve the building the best we can. Since September, we've had, or just a little bit before, so we've had asbestos removed from the basement. We've painted rooms on the inside with our own elbow grease. We're going to try to make that building back to what it was when we got it in 1922. So that's my pitch, if you have any questions.
I did ask you this on your first presentation. I believe you're amenable to allowing the youth center to have some
Sure.
time over there?
Yeah, yeah. That's, whatever they want to figure out and whatever the schedule is, we're amenable to anybody asking us to use the building if they
I
want.
think Rick Gorman would like to run some programs over there.
That was actually going to be one of my top questions today, after you mentioned that last time, was I'd like to know, like, that would be a huge buoy to my support if the youth center is willing to use the building and, you can accommodate that, that would make me feel very good about supporting this project.
We answer questions and take on all comers when they call us up to use our building for whatever, so.
I actually think your building's a big secret to a lot of people in town. I think a lot of people would probably rent it even more often if they knew.
And it's cheap.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
we're trying to do it as part of, a community. There are people who can't rent the Holiday Inn to have a 5-year-old's birthday party or something like that. So we try to do it whatever the gas cost us. I have to raise up the price to $1,000 a month now because of gas prices. But, we're working on that. Things like energy efficiency, lighting, and heating thermostats, we've done that to keep our costs down so that we can continue to do that kind of stuff.
Could a roof, this is just a random question. Could a new roof accommodate solar panels for heating? Or is that not allowed?
You won't let cell phone towers in
please
the center. I didn't think.
me.
You won't
I'm
let cell
learning.
phone towers in the
Don't-
center.
don't
I don't think
hate,
you'll let me
don't
put
hate.
solar panels on the roof. If it was an, we had a building in Lowell, they put solar panels on the roof.
Or even like a
It's-
heat pump. Again, that's,
Yeah, that's down the road, but.
I think the broader issue is, what's the general health of the building, and so we do this, are you gonna come back in a couple of years with something else, where there's another problem, or, what's the total?
It's had a new heating system put in. We went to forced hot air probably 10 years ago. Other than that, the plumbing is fine. We did have a leak in one of our bathrooms that we're working on with a couple of members right now to replace the floor. Leak was just a leak. It was their toilets are from the 1950s, so they're based in the wall. So when it leaked, it was in the wall the entire time. So nobody noticed it until the floor was a wreck. So we're stripping one of the bathroom floors, but we're doing that with elbow grease. But other than that, the asbestos is removed from the basement. Basement is dry.
We built the chimney two years back.
Yep, we rebuilt the chimney. I brought a bunch of older people. I've only
Yeah,
been in the
there you
lodge
go.
for 5 years, so these guys go back to, Zeke was there when they built it. I told him I wouldn't make that joke, but I couldn't help myself.
Feel
But
free to answer, I don't know to this question, but what is the historical significance of this building?
it was on the town common at one time. It was built as Fire Station Number 2. We bought it 6 years after the town built it. There's no, in my records, there's no reason why, after 6 years, they decided to sell that building. So we had it picked up and moved to where it is right now.
So how much of the original building actually remains? How much of the original fire station?
The upstairs has been turned into a lodge room, but it's not much different. I actually have some of the original pictures. The downstairs is a little bit different because I think it was a carriage house back there. So the center columns that were in the middle of the function hall downstairs were removed. And there was a construction done for I-beam support for the middle of that. So if you look, there are some soffits in there with gigantic I-beams in them. But other than paint, I mean, a lot of the woodwork is all the same. The heating system's different now with steam heat, but
What about externally, other than the siding on it, is everything the same?
horrifically, somebody at some point in time decided to put vinyl siding on it. I don't know what the condition of the siding was. I wasn't around then. But it is vinyl sided. Part of the roofing contracts we have are to fix some of the soffit issues we have along the edges with flashing and ice damage stuff. Other than that, just getting the soffits painted because they are still natural wood. They didn't cover those up with vinyl. It's pretty good shape. The building at one time did add a small addition to the back from the original firehouse to support a conference room. It became a junk room for 20 years. It was full of chairs and old file cabinets, and we just cleaned that out. And a kitchen. I don't know how the fire department had it as a firehouse without a kitchen, but maybe when we moved it, we left the kitchen. I don't know. But other than that, the structure on the outside is sound. We've replaced things here and there. We have some window issues in the very front attic windows things, which I'm sure I'm going to have to go in front of the historic thing to get permission to replace those panes. But we've mitigated any damage that is from those for the time being. So it's.
I'd be curious, Ron, do you have concerns about this sort of from a historic preservation?
No,
I mean,
it's on the Mass Historical Commission inventory of historical places. So it definitely qualifies for CPA funds. That shouldn't be an issue.
I have a comment. You talked about, you didn't use the term, but I perceived it as sweat equity. And that struck me in a positive way because it's not like you're just looking for funds to make a fix. You're actually, your community is investing their own time and talents in maintaining the property, which I find really good. I'm very, very impressed by that.
Some of the newer membership we have has come in and, this is ugly, that needs fixed. Deferred maintenance is a word I hate. And back in the day, I think everybody thought they were spending their own money and not a community lodge money and didn't do anything. But since I took over in September, there's been a lot of new improvements done, and it's been done with the brothers from the lodge. I mean, we had to hire an alarm company to come in and put some new alarms in and things we couldn't do legally.
Yep.
But everything else that we can possibly do on our own, we are doing on our own.
That's great.
Or
Love
not
that.
only just not even the North Andover, we've had gentlemen come from some of the lower lodges and do some work, and and I can reach out to pretty much the whole state.
Let me ask you a question, and I'm not trying to be difficult, but I think it's a legitimate question from the town's perspective. We fund this project, you build it, and you sell the facility 2 years later. Can we claw the money back?
Or your similar question, or does your organization go out of business in 2 years, or you move on? You move on from the building, for whatever reason.
Masonry's been in the state since 1733.
Yeah.
So since before we were a country, we're not going out of business.
Well, you know what I mean. You
But-
gotta move on from the building.
It's more likely that the building would be sold.
Right.
And that's my point, is that if you dispose of the building, you've gotten the benefit from the town, and this is one of the things that, by the way, Tim, when I did the research on Springfield and in Cambridge, is that if people get this money, if they sell the property within a couple of years, they have to give the money back. So,
Yeah.
I would be in favor of a similar, sort of stipulation where, if we decide to fund this, there's a stipulation where, that building remains for its current use for X amount of years or something like that.
yeah, or else the money gets applied.
Or else the money comes back to the.
We don't plan on going out of business
I know you don't.
anytime soon.
I know you don't plan to.
No, but what
Yeah.
I'm saying though is also no individual can benefit from, if the lodge was to close or move and they were to sell that building, that money would be allocated to the properties, the property group right now. And if there was a clawback clause in any monies we received, then from the proceeds of the building, we'd have to pay it back, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd be
And we'd
fine.
be amenable to
So
that,
you'd
'cause
be
we-
fine with that sort of
if-
stipulation.
Yeah, if you want to say when the building closes or we sell the building, don't worry about it, you'll be long gone and so won't I
Yeah.
before that
No,
building
no,
closes.
it isn't.
Good.
I know,
It's
I know,
just-
I know
it's
will
kinda
not be
like,
gone
you know,
as long as I'm alive.
Yeah.
I'm a member of 5 different lodges in 5 different towns, and this is the one that I've taken, it's not my original, but this is the one I've taken to heart, because it is such a blank canvas to work with. And the people that are members of the lodge, like Brother Zucchini, but they've been working on it for years, and I want to keep it going that way. I want to have it be my lodge for 60 years.
Good for
I
you.
won't live that long, but. Any other questions? Terrific, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
Stan Limpert on behalf of the North Andover Historical Society. Let me try this and see if it helps, okay? Let me try to answer 3 questions. Safety, longevity, return on investment. The building was condemned because of safety problems, right? 3 years ago, or whenever it was.
And this is Schofield Mill, just in case anybody's
Schofield Mill,
watching
sorry.
at home.
Sorry,
Schofield
sorry.
Mill application.
That is a major part of this restoration project, is to fix that problem and eliminate that safety hazard, if you will, to replace the beams in the basement portion of the main building so that that's no longer a consideration. The rest of the floor in the main building is at grade. It's, it's basically on the ground. So there's, the structure itself is in pretty good shape. And there's no reason to believe that that isn't completely safe. I mean, you would fall 3 inches if you fell through the floor, but that won't happen because everything's in good shape in those areas. So as far as the safety concerns are, we would be addressing those as one of the major tasks of this particular effort. How long will the building last, right? I think the good news for us is, and I think we might not have wanted to take on this project if the town hadn't completely refurbished the exterior envelope of the building 10 years ago. So they went to a lot of trouble with CPC money to put a new roof on and some gutters, to reside the building and do some work for that, to actually insulate the building. And they also did some work on the foundation. They did some pretty significant improvements on making the foundation better than it had been. As part of that project, the good news is that as they were residing the building, where they found structural or sheathing problems on the building, they replaced it. So there was repair work that went on as they were doing that project. So some of the more egregious issues that they found, they repaired. And so that is all to our benefit, so that that's not something we have to worry about going forward. Is the structure in perfect shape? No, it's not. But it's in certainly good enough shape to last another 50 or 100 years. There's no question about that. The person that we're going to have do the work for us is an expert in historic building preservation. And he said one of the things that he looks for in old buildings like that is when the bottom of the building starts to bulge out, it shows foundation and sill problems. And we walked around the building, no evidence of that whatsoever. So we feel very comfortable that that building has a long life ahead of it, particularly for the use we're going to be putting it to. It's not going to be a retail store. There aren't going to be a lot of stuff in there. There's not going to be a lot of traffic. We're going to use it 6 or 8 days a year in the good weather. And so our use of that building is a very light load compared to what it was even with the thrift shop. So we feel very comfortable with this project. We feel like this is a reasonable investment of money for this project. Tim, you'd raised this, you'd asked a question the last time we talked about this. You know, it's no longer completely authentic, right? It's not that piece of antique furniture. It's not like that. It represents what it is, and it, to its credit, that building has been in that location for over 220 years. That's, in some ways, the most amazing part of the mill, is that that building has stood there for all that time. And it represents the town's industrial heritage. You know, it was the first textile mill in North Andover, for sure. So the preservation opportunities that we feel like we've got, as well as the educational opportunities that this will give us, seem just ripe for use. I mean, it's just an excellent use of the property. And, you know, to answer the question, we're the Historical Society. We're going to be in business forever, and we're going to keep those properties forever. We may need to have CRs or whatever they are on the properties, but we're going to hold on to those forever. There would never be any intent on our part in selling any of the historical properties we've got. So just a reminder, our application asks for $300,000, but you will, or the town will return the $200,000 that it got from you all a couple of years ago that they have not used. So really the net expense here for this project is $100,000. There's already a $200,000 down payment on the project. So it seems like a really good use of the funds. We feel very comfortable with the building and its longevity. Proposals, you've seen the documentation, I think, you know, it was distributed. You know, there were proposals to, you know, jack the building up and build it, put a brand new foundation under it. We don't really think the building is worth that much money. I mean, it's not that significant to spend $600,000-800,000 on it. This amount of money seems reasonable, and we feel very comfortable that the building has more than enough longevity to justify this investment in the building. And you've already made an investment in the building to date. So we really feel comfortable with the project. We feel like this is still a really good thing to do for our community. It represents a major part of our history, and we're really looking forward to having the opportunity to fix this up and let the community start to make use of it. So, questions?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I saw the work Steve Foster's done on kind of the structural stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's got an estimate of like $400,000 just to do the structural stuff. And, you know, I know there's a huge problem with old buildings in that they disintegrate unless they're being used. And we see it like repeated over and over again all over the place. And it just seems to me like, you know, and I know there's an estimate and so forth. I know from estimates, you know, working in construction and a lot of the things that I'm working on, you're talking about the inside of a building, that things are very well known, lots of people worked in the building. Like, this is not that. Like, I don't think those numbers, you know, I think those numbers are just sort of back of the envelope. And I really think it's worth like a larger discussion about, like, do we want to invest? I don't think the question is, do we want to invest $300,000 in this building? I think the question is, do we want to invest $700,000 or $800,000 in this building? Because I think that's what it's going to take. And I don't think there's any like use that's going to keep it, you know, active and used. And that's how you stop having these problems of buildings disintegrating. Because if people aren't in them and they're not getting used, no one's checking the heat. That's when the leaks and the mold and everything else starts. And like, I just think, you know, I think, you know, towns have to be really intentional, and societies and nonprofits, you have to be really intentional about what you're going to preserve and why. And I just don't know that, you know, like if I were on the board of the Historical Society, I could see saying like, is this, you know, is this really worth it? Like you have amazing core assets, you know, in the Parsett Barnard House and some other things that you know really well and you take really good care of. And that's the decision for the board to make. But when I look at this, I think this is like a $700,000 or $800,000 project, and I don't know what you get at the end of it. You get like a dry building. You get, yeah, and you get a dry building that's really not the original building. I mean, there's no evidence that that was a mill, you know, left.
There's no, necessarily, there is no, I mean, you can spend $600,000 or $800,000 doing this, right? You can do that. There's no clear indication that that's necessary to do. I mean, the implication is, if you don't do it, the building's gonna fall down or something. I don't think that's at all the case with an old building. Just because it's old and there are some structural problems, that does not mean, that's a lightly loaded building, single story, you know, what's the problem? And to speak to one of your questions, we have caretakers. That's how we deal with our buildings. Your point exactly. We have people that check our historic buildings all the time. When we take on this building, our caretakers will put that on their list of buildings to check on a regular basis. So we don't have leaks, you know, we don't have problems, we don't have animals, you know, we do that all the time. That's what we do. And we already have those people in place to be able to do that with this building in addition. So, you know, I think we're trying to be responsible stewards of something that's very historic. You know, it's to the point, is it exactly like how it was built? No, of course not. But it represents that history. And the building looks like it looked 220 years ago. It's in that location looking like it looked 220 years ago. Is it the same material, blah, blah, blah? No, of course not. So what I would say is, if it's important for us to preserve our historical heritage, we've got a way to do that. And I feel very comfortable with this project. I don't think we're throwing good money after bad, or however you want to think about it. I think this is a project that we can accomplish, and this building will be available to the community for a long time to come. I don't think that's a problem. So,
I guess, Dan, my concern in this is, you know, we always like to bring in sort of what I'm gonna call our experts. And I think our two experts are Steve Foster and the building inspector. And the understanding that I have is that they think there's no way in the world we could ever do this for $300,000. And so you're rolling the dice on this. I agree with Bill. I think it could be triple that. And, you know, at some point, it doesn't make any sense. It's a small building. I mean, I think we all appreciate the historical significance of it, but at some point, it's just not a rational decision to make.
yeah,
And
right. I don't know.
that's what I think you're going up against. I think there's a lot of risk. You'd never get it done for $300,000.
Well, right. It depends on the project that we're taking on. We're not taking on the jacking up the building and putting a new foundation under it. We're not doing that. Definitely not doing that. We're repairing what we've got and getting it back into.
Do you know if the building inspector will let you get an occupancy permit again if you do just what you're saying? I mean, is he on board with that?
I
does he agree
assume
with you?
so. I don't.
But so you haven't talked to him, though?
Not specifically about, the building was condemned because of the problem in the basement and nothing else, right? That's my understanding. But we can certainly I can certainly talk to the building inspector and find out what his opinion would be if we fixed the basement problem and did the other restoration work that we're thinking about doing in the building. We can certainly do that.
I mean, when I look at it and I look at like the fact that, you know, the boring beetle or something has totally infected all the, like, structural beams and so forth. Like,
In the basement.
yeah, when I see things like that, and then, I forward it to you, and we'll make sure the committee has it, but, when Steve Foster looked at this in 2020, well prior to massive inflation in building, he came up with an estimate of, and this is for structural, of, 491,000 with a contingency. So, that's 5 years ago, and so, when I look at that, I say, like, that's $500,000 for purely structural repairs 5 years ago. Like, I just don't see it. And maybe there's something to be said for, a real further study and so forth, but.
Well, I think it gets back to John's point. I don't think it's worth, honestly, I don't believe it's worth spending $700,000 or $800,000 on that building. If that's the number that you want, if that's what you think you want us to spend to preserve the building.
It's that's the amount of money it'll spend to make the thing sort of get an occupancy permit and being able to be used, I think.
Yeah, so that's an important question. So we need to ask the building inspector what it takes to get an occupancy permit, right? And if it's more than fixing the problem in the basement, then we have to go back and reevaluate our plan. Yeah, there's no question.
Stan, could you give us just briefly a description of what planned uses you have for the Schofield Mill that would provide a public benefit?
Yes, as you know, we have our historic buildings open periodically during the warm weather. They're open at least one day.
This one in particular, though?
It would be the same, exactly the same as Parson Barnard House. It would be open at least one day a month to the public from May through October. Would also be available for students, classes to go there for tours during the school year. So, and it could be open for, special visits if somebody had a group that wanted to go see the structure itself. So that would be our plan, just like we do with Parson Barnard House or Johnson Cottage.
So it would be more of an educational resource,
Absolutely.
perhaps?
Absolutely.
Information about textile history?
And the history of the mills in North Andover.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
Okay. Good.
Stan, where did your numbers come from with your estimates?
I'm sorry, say again?
Where did your numbers come from?
From the preservation carpenter, contractor that's going to do the work.
Yeah,
I guess I wonder, and I'm still, I guess I'm still trying to, as a town resident now for 4 years, maybe sort of understand it a little more in terms of like these sorts of buildings. Like, is the fact that we just need them to remain standing because they're important to our history, like, is that enough? Is, we're gonna have it open 6 days a year, or 12 days a year. Is that enough? Is that enough to invest $300,000, $400,000, $500,000? I'm still trying to get a sense of that, and I think a lot of my spidey sense says, well, why are we going to invest $300,000 into a building that we're going to use 6 or 7 days a year? Well, because it's historically significant. Well, it's only really the bones. It's only really the skeleton of it, not the inside of it. I can be convinced by others on this committee that are a little more in the know in terms of the history of North Andover. But just as a lay person and new resident, I wonder, like, what's enough? Because, to me, talking about how, we're going to be in the building 7 days a year, doesn't seem like enough to me.
Well, I think you sort of ask a more fundamental question, which is it worth preserving our history? Is it worth it?
I don't think that was what he was saying.
Well, of course, I think it's worth preserving our history, but is this building, is this building, does it rise to that level? Does it rise to that level? And considering the use of it, you know?
Yep.
Well, so I think you have to separate it into two things.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not an application for recreation. This is a historical preservation.
Right.
I don't know. I would say maybe the top 3 buildings in North Andover in terms of historical significance. I don't know.
Yeah,
Is that
absolutely.
exaggerating?
Yeah, no, and then this book is written up in many histories of the growth of the textile industry in New England. I mean, this is a known, famous building, and the people who built it were some of the more prominent entrepreneurs associated with the Industrial Revolution in our area. So it's a known historic thing.
So what goes through your mind, Ron? Not to put you on the spot, but
So what I'm thinking is that you may want to get the contractor that you've been talking with together with Steve and the building inspector and see if you can answer some of the questions that are, some of the concerns that we're hearing here.
Yeah.
And maybe,
I also have a thought. I'm sort of thinking in a similar way to my friend here. And if it is that significant of a historical property that we really would hope to promote, maybe if this were to happen and the renovations were to be done, there would be more, like, is there more use than like a 6 to 12 or whatever times of year where people can actually attend something and be educated, or, you know, are there materials that can be brought into this space that, you know, so to make it more almost like a mini museum. But, you know, the point I'm trying to make is, you know, for a potential investment, like, what's the return? It's not just like, oh, well, we're gonna open it up 6 times a year. That seems like, it seems like kind of a low ball for potential if it is that significant. I don't know what the Historical Society is thinking.
Well, yeah.
well, generally too, like, I would say, you know, as a quote-unquote newer person in town, like, if this is the 3rd most important historic structure in our town, you know, there's a lot of reasons it sounds like there is, you know, there's value to preserving this.
Right.
But if nobody in town knows about it,
Well,
that's a problem.
I would totally reject that that's the 3rd most significant
Okay.
thing in town, not even close.
Okay.
I mean,
Uh-oh.
come on.
Got an enemy here.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, you can see it in the old center. We can count 10 buildings in the old center that are more important than that. It's
More important
significant
in what
because
way?
of the use, not because of the building.
more important in what way?
Well, I mean, the Unitarian Church, the Parson Barnard House, Johnson Cottage. I mean, there's a 3 right there that I think are much more significant and important to the town because they're structures, they're iconic.
I'll give you Parson Barnard. I'd give you Parson Barnard, but not the other 2.
But my point is, though, if our town isn't educated and nobody knows, you know, of its importance, then it just stands there, right?
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So if we're gonna make an investment in this building, a huge part of this investment needs to be, how do we get it more actively involved? How do we, you know,
Correct.
so it's not just something we all drive by every day and don't know what the hell the thing is.
No question at all. So maybe I'll just ask you, Adam, have you been to the Parson Barnard House when it's open?
I don't think I have yet, no.
So there you go. So that happens every summer, 6 times at least. That's one of our most historic, iconic, whatever, houses.
Right.
That's part of the challenge that the Historic Society has, is to get people to engage with our history, right?
What's that?
You can go on the website and find out
Yeah.
if you're
You
interested.
know, there are other ways that people get information.
Oh, I know, and that's,
Not just
and
like
we
go
do
to the
that,
website.
and, you
That's
know.
sort of like passive.
And frankly, the genius thing that the Historical Society has done is the building, the new building.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
that has had a profound impact
Yes.
Because it's a place where people come all the time.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
beautiful.
And that's the thing that's going to drive the greater knowledge of all the historical resources
Correct.
in town.
Correct.
more than
And,
anything.
you know, and it is,
Yeah.
it's, it has the opportunity to be a sort of a blank canvas where you can put whatever you want in it, exhibits or something. So we are in the process, the town is in the process, under the auspices of the Historical Commission, of preparing a historical preservation master plan. And one of the primary recommendations of that is community education, right? To educate our community about our historic resources and, you know, what we've got and why it's important and why you should come and look at it and learn about it. And so that's one of the primary recommendations from that master plan is we need to educate our community about its own history and try to engage it so that our community can appreciate it. And yes, it would be nice if we could have it open even more frequently. If we get people to come, that would be good. There's no harm in doing that, but, you know, our experience has been that the frequency at which we do it is about right for the audience. You know, that's about the rate at which we can attract people. But, you know, we're always open to new suggestions about how to do it better or engage the public more effectively. And to Rick's point, it doesn't have to be, it can be virtual. You know, you can go to the Parson Barnard House on our website and tour the house if you want. So there's all of that, all of those possibilities. So
I guess another way to look at it is, so we're considering $250,000 for the Atkins Gate at Richard Cemetery versus, if the numbers work out, $100,000 for this project. And it's just no comparison in terms of historical significance.
Well, I think one of the challenges I have too is like, and I don't want to get into this like big existential discussion about this board, but a lot of the things that we think about approving, they're in conflict, right? When we think about, you know, there's folks from housing that want money from this board. There's folks that want open space. And those two things can often conflict with one another, right? There's folks that want historic preservation. There's folks that want recreation, right? So, you know, one of the challenges I feel like I have now too as a board member is, okay, well, is the $300,000 that Stan wants for, you know, for something historic, is that better used for open space, or is that better used for our community to support those in public housing? You know, that's an interesting challenge that we have as a board, and
Well, we have our percentages of where money has to be allocated.
Right.
So we're kind of restricted as to what we can
in
do
that
terms of percent.
standpoint, that's right.
I don't see a lot of conflict because there's separate entities where you're putting money towards.
So, Stan, you presented a plan that basically negates much of the superstructure that the Foster proposal back in 2020 suggested.
correct.
And suggesting that it's not needed, and I think that you got to pass a smell test. Why even bother if the town says, no go? You know, you're not going to get any kind of permit. My only 2 cents worth, and I don't, you do tug at my heart, by the way, on this stuff, but I'm also kind of practical. I mean, I said before, what percentage of this building is really, dates back to the original. It's 600 square foot. You look in there right now, and they've put a lot of things in there that were not original, such as the kitchen, the bathrooms, a lot of the things. I mean, I'm sure much of the structure has been redone. If you take a look. So, you know, is it 30% of the building is still there? You see the picture on the outside represents what it is. Okay, that's a fair thing. But, you know, is it
Right.
lipstick on a pig kind of thing?
Well, again, this is nothing about any of these projects has been to return this building to what it may have looked like in 1802. Nobody's proposing doing that. So in the historical record, as Ron had mentioned for another property, this is not seen as, let's call it, architecturally significant. It's seen as historically significant, right? It's the same building, looking the same way, in the same location it's been for 220 years. That's the significance of the building. Not that it has all the same interior to it, blah, blah, blah. What I would say is, if you went back and peeled all the siding off of it, all the framing in there is probably from 220 years ago. So, you know, the bones are 220 years old, right?
What's the building in the opposite corner from the common? That small little thing that's never opened?
Oh, the hay scale.
Hay scales.
Yeah, yeah.
Is, you know, that's historic significance, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And that seems to be, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, is it ever open for tours, or
What's that?
is that open for tours once in a while?
Occasionally.
Yeah.
I mean, not so often, but we
Boy,
try.
If you could just sort of put some Elmer's glue or clear glue on Schofield Mill and just sort of make it solid and then put a fence around it saying this is what it was.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
All
know,
right,
Ken.
I think we've definitely, made our feelings clear on this one, and
Okay.
so,
I personally want to thank you for your advocacy.
Yes, thank you.
Like-
Comments.
This is in your heart, and I appreciate that. We don't yet know how we're gonna decide.
Yeah.
But I personally want to thank you for just, being an advocate. And I think we'll make the best decision we can based on the information we have.
I appreciate you saying that, Marcia, because I have to struggle to not sort of make it become an ego thing, right? I mean, because I'm very passionate about our town's history and saving it, preserving it. And so it's very hard for me to not sort of take it as a personal affront when you just won't give me the money, that. So I have to just say, I just have to, continue to tell myself, we all have to think this is a good idea. It's not just me. We all have to think this is a good idea. And if we don't, then we're not doing the right thing. We have to think of something else, so.
Stan, our community doesn't exist with people like you to advocate for things like this, so thank you.
Well, and to your point, I mean, there's always folks saying, we need to preserve our history, and other people saying, yeah, I'm not so sure, maybe we could do that, maybe not. So it's always an ongoing discussion. How much is enough? And, to John's point, when we have the opportunity now of new facilities that give us all kinds of things we can do now that we couldn't do before, and this is a great chance for us to really start to engage our community and bring history to.
Take the win.
Yeah.
All right, we gotta
all right,
wrap
we
this.
have
All right.
one more application that we were
Really need to get.
planning on considering tonight. Do we want to, Zach, we don't have a ton for next week, do we? We have four next week. And I think they're all less of a heavy lift than the ones we had tonight. So,
We good?
well, no, I mean, do we have any, does anybody have a problem if we, I guess we only had John's application left. Does anyone mind if we push that to the
I thought we
6th?
talked about that last week.
We did talk
You did
about
Oh, we
last
did?
About it last week.
Okay.
We did.
I know, we also have a debate meeting, so on the 6th, we'll hear the other presentations. So if we've done that, then that's great. We also have what you missed, Adam, is we're gonna hear presentations on the 6th. On the 20th, we'll have a debate and vote. So it's, if you have any information that you want,
You said next week. The 6th isn't next week. so-
that's what I
The
meant.
6th is our next meeting?
Our next meeting,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you had mentioned in the past, John, that like,
So can we just agree to get out of here tonight and we can debate it later?
yeah,
Or
no,
what?
I'm not trying to
I
make it.
second.
No, I'm not trying to make a debate now, but I do think, like, John, you had mentioned at a previous meeting talking about like, I had essentially said, well, is there an opportunity for us to talk about a lot of these things? And you had said, well, usually if
That's the 20th.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's going to be an opportunity because I don't on a lot of the things we talk about, I don't have a sense of what everybody here feels, and I'd like to work through that.
The 20th.
The 20th.
Trying to-
Great. Great.
I make a motion to call a meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're adjourned.